pretty much a full-blown alcoholic by the time I was 13. You never know you're a drug addict until you don't have any. Eat a hit of acid, I'm going to eat 15 and try to touch God. Finally figured out what my ultimate trigger was, fucking oxygen.
Welcome to The Recovery Idiot. Please like and subscribe and visit therecoveryidiot.com. Visit our store and help us launder some money. Please follow us into all the dark alleys of the internet. The following contains explicit language and situations that some might find unsettling. Viewer discretion is advised.
My name is Leroy, recovered drug addict. Today with me in the Section 9 studios I have...
What's going on, guys? My name's Chris Harble and I'm a recovered drug addict.
And this is very exciting because I have seen Chris for a couple years in meetings. And you know, there's a lot of people that raise their hands and talk in meetings, and I want to leave. But when Chris raises his hand, I know it's something that's going to get me pumped up because he talks about the things that are important to me. Using drugs, the big book, and God. And when I hear somebody talk about those three things in a meeting, I pay attention. So Chris, how exactly did you end up in AA meetings?
Well, my first AA meeting, I was 13 years old. Started drinking at 12 years old and was pretty much a full-blown alcoholic by the time I was 13. And the treatment center that I went to, the adolescent treatment center, told my parents that in order for me to stay sober, I was going to need to go to AA meetings. So they brought me to some AA meetings.
Did it work?
Absolutely not. I'll never forget the first meeting I went to. Knowing what I know now about how meetings are, it was definitely a closed meeting because they had a go-round in the beginning where you had to introduce yourself as an alcoholic or a person with a desire to stop drinking. And they got to me, and I didn't say anything because I didn't know, if I was supposed to say anything yet or anything, because it was apparent to me that all the other people in the room knew each other. And they got to me, and they all just kind of turned and stared at me. And the one guy said, "Well, can you introduce yourself?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm Chris." And they said, "Okay, are you an alcoholic?" I said, I mean, they said I am, sure. They said, "Okay, well, why are you here?" And I said, "Well, the treatment center that I went to, they told my parents I had to go to AA meetings. So my parents pulled up in front of your meeting and opened up the door and said, 'Get out, we'll be back in an hour, don't fucking go anywhere else.' So I'm here." And they said, "Okay, do you have a desire to stop drinking?" And I said, "Absolutely not." And they kind of chuckled and they said, "So you're at an AA meeting, but you have absolutely no desire to stop drinking?" I said, "No, I love drinking and I plan to do it for the rest of my life." This one old guy took a big pull off his cigar and looked at me and said, "So you got no desire to stop drinking?" I said, "No," once again. And he said, "Then why don't you get the fuck out of here?" And I said, "That's a great idea." And I walked out of the meeting and I stood out in front waiting for my parents to get there. And they said, "How was the meeting?" I said, "They're a bunch of fucking assholes and these people suck and I don't know why you're making me do this." That was the beginning of my journey into AA.
I can't believe you went to a detox at 13. I've never heard that before. Fast forward your life, being a teenager or whatever, those formative years that make us drug addicts and alcoholics. How much crazier did it get after 13?
It got a lot darker, a lot faster. I remember the therapist that I had at that treatment center telling me that if I didn't keep going to AA and get sober and stay sober, that it was going to get very dark for me, because she said if you're already at this stage, being 13 years old, it's going to get worse. You're going to start doing drugs you said you never do. You're going to start doing things you just never intended on doing, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, whatever, you crazy old lady. And the funny thing was, I think she was probably 28 or 29 years old at the time. But to me, she was a crazy old lady. And she was right, Went to high school at 5 different high schools because I joined a gang at a young age. I was expelled several places for fighting, was put in the police gang book at 14 years old. So that haunted me for years. You get pulled over for going 5 miles over the speed limit and 6 cars surround your car and all the officers have their guns drawn because you're a documented gang member on police record. And I still didn't think anything was wrong. Then finally my parents put me into a private school that was a closed campus, so you didn't get to leave at lunch and not come back, or leave at lunch and go to McDonald's and get in a fight or whatever.
So you were incarcerated.
Yeah, it was basically like incarceration high school, and I beat the shit out of a kid there and got thrown out of there. So then I got sent back to public school system, and because I had been in that school for a couple semesters before I got thrown out, there was 4 or 5 classes that I had taken that they would not count in public school. So they said, well, in order to graduate on time, you're going to have to go to summer school And I said, yeah, you're out of your fucking mind. I'm not going to summer school. So I went to the Board of Education about 2 weeks later and took the GED test and passed everything. Went on from there. During high school, I'd gone to a lot of funerals and seen a lot of my friends get murdered. You know, several of them I was literally with the day before, and then find out the next day they got shot in the head that night. That happened 3 or 4 different times. Gentleman who was, how shall I put this, the head of the street company that I worked for, got raided and went to federal prison, and several other people I was involved with got swept up in that and went to federal prison. So I thought maybe I should go a little different direction, and I found some people that were going to a bunch of Grateful Dead shows back when Jerry was still alive. Nice and mellow, and there won't be a whole lot of
drive-by
shootings happening
when
in
they're
the parking
huffing
lot.
the balloons of nitrous.
And I can still do drugs and just go all over the country and do drugs and sell drugs, and this is fantastic. So did that for a while. And after parties for dead shows, and if you're in a major city, there's normally a rave going on. This is back when raves were actually raves, not like the sanitized version that people get now, where you get a 3-day ticket for fucking $500 to some civic center, and there's full security teams and all that bullshit. This was like an abandoned warehouse in the worst part of town.
It started at midnight,
Started
ecstasy
at midnight,
everywhere.
went till 10 o'clock in the morning. Whoever was throwing the party was controlling the drug supply. I got to be friends with most of the guys that threw the party, so I was invited because I had gotten hooked up with a medical gas permit.
Yes.
So I sold balloons for about 5 years.
Did you ever come to New Jersey in the late 90s?
No, this is all around Chicago.
I love those balloons. I didn't know they were a thing until my first Grateful Dead parking lot. Oh, what a world.
I used to always keep a tank in my room behind my headboard, so during the week I could just crack one off anytime I wanted to. But yeah, that was quite a fruitful venture, because at the time I would get full-size dental tank was about $200, and I could pull about $2,000 out of it. Definitely a good employment source, and allegedly slinging some ecstasy and whatever else on the side. So gainful employment was a top priority for me. From dead and rave scene, just kind of evolved over into the club scene, because more and more clubs started having DJs that were playing underground music as electronic music started to get more and more noticed. The drug evolution kind of started too. It was kind of like the ecstasy started getting really shitty. You never knew what you were getting. It's funny what these kids call Molly these days. We called it Molly when it was pure MDMA, just the MDMA molecule. It looked like a bump of coke in a clear gel cap, and you rolled all night. You didn't
have seizures,
didn't have seizures and run naked in the woods and weird shit. Like, I don't know what the fuck these kids think they're taking nowadays, but it is not MDMA. At the time, it started to cross over into the clubs, and by then I'm drinking more and more because it's accepted. When I'm drinking that much, I'm definitely going to need to start doing a whole lot of cocaine to be able to drink the way that I'm drinking. So I started using and allegedly distributing some of that. My best friend at the time, God rest his soul, he was the head of luggage for United Airlines at O'Hare Airport. So he got approached by a couple fine gentlemen from Colombia to get a few things through the luggage line without passing through the customs line. So that was my new job, working for them. And we had a great time and made a lot of money for several years doing that. I don't know, I had a lot of fun before it became not fun. I don't ever demonize alcohol and drugs, because I had a great time while it was a great time. It did exactly what it was supposed to do. It made me comfortable in my own skin. I hear every once in a while some idiot in a meeting say, my worst day sober is better than my best day getting high, and that is the dumbest shit I've ever heard in my fucking life. I will never say that, because it's not true. I've had some amazing times getting loaded, and I've had some absolutely horrifying days since I've gotten sober. I didn't want to get high, but they were just fucking horrible, After that, I got introduced to heroin. It had become more of an accepted thing. People had started snorting it. I had always looked at it like any other drug. I had done coke and meth a ton of times. I'd smoked crack a bunch of times. I never once woke up the next day and was like, man, I should go rob a fucking house or rob a bank and get some more of that cocaine. The cocaine I always had, so it was never an issue. So I always joke with people, you never know you're a drug addict until you don't have any. It never got nothing ever really got its hooks into me. I could smoke meth all weekend and Monday morning go, all right, well, that was a fun weekend, and that was it. But once I started snorting heroin, once every couple weeks, and then it was once a week, and then it was a couple times a week, and then eventually I'd started snorting it several days a week, and eventually one day I snorted like $60 worth and didn't feel like I really got high. I wasn't dope sick, but I didn't get high. So a friend of mine had said, well, I think you kind of crossed the line. You're probably going to have to shoot it in order to feel it from now on. That was what began my descent into hell for a number of years. I did cocaine for a lot of years. I did meth for a lot of years. I smoked cocaine for a lot of years. Never stole anything from anybody. Within 6 months of the first time that I snorted heroin, I was stealing money from my family. And it just got worse and worse from there. They gave me a lot of chances to get sober, and finally at a certain point, I had moved out, and then I'd have to move back in with them because I'd fuck off everything and get thrown out of the apartment and lose everything, and they'd let me come back and say, you know, just stay sober and you can stay here until you get back on your feet. And then I'd relapse while living with them and steal everything that wasn't nailed down. Say, okay, now you can get the fuck out. And I'd go out on the street and then check into a detox. I've got a long detox history.
How old were you when you went to your first detox after heroin?
2000, 25, 26 maybe, something like that. Yeah, man. And when I checked in there, this was before, when I first went to detox, there was no Subutex, there was no Suboxone. So most detoxes that I had heard about, if you went in there for heroin, they used methadone. So I thought that was what this place used. I asked my parents to bring me there and take my car keys because I said, you know, I really want to kick. I don't want to do this anymore. And I went there and found out after I started to feel sick the next morning, because I did enough dope before I went in that like that night I was going to sleep okay and all that. I wake up the next morning and I start feeling sick, and it's normally about time for my wake up shot. So I go to the nurse's station and I'm like, yeah, can I get medicated now? And she was like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, well, you guys do methadone, right? And she was like, no. Why would we want to get you hooked on methadone? You're trying to get off of drugs. Why would we want to give you a new habit? And I was like, so what do you do for my dope sickness? She's like, well, we have stomach tablets if you get an upset stomach. We have Pepto if you get diarrhea. We have aspirin if you get a headache. There's granola bars and hot cocoa in the little station over here. I was like, you gotta be fucking kidding me. I had no idea this was a cold turkey detox. So it was like basically cold turkey for like 5-6 days I was there. And I'll never forget the one guy that came in and spoke. He was an old Hell's Angel, and I ended up running into him a lot of times on the street after that. He's a good dude. He pulled me aside because I was one of the only people in there that was there for heroin at the time. You gotta think, man, 25 years ago, there was not heroin in the suburbs. Heroin was something that you had to go into the hood, and you kind of had to know somebody and know exactly where to get it and who to get it from. And a lot of places you had to have somebody like vouch for you.
Yes, I know what you're talking about.
Because they see a white, I'm just being honest, man.
No,
they see a white guy in that neighborhood, they think you're a cop.
Yes, absolutely.
Nowadays I hear about like fucking people in like upper class middle schools getting caught with heroin and shit. I'm like, there was nobody in high school was doing it when I was. This guy told me, when you get out of here, you need to go to AA and get sober, because he said, I'm telling you from personal experience. He said, memory of this detox about 6 or 8 months from now is going to vanish. And that desire to want to do a shot of dope is going to jump up off the sidewalk one day out of nowhere and hit you right between the fucking eyes. And you're going to have no defense against it. And I was like, dude, I will never touch that shit again, man. I just went through hell, blah, 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 blah. Here's the thing that I never put two and two together. People always say marijuana is a gateway drug. Not for me. Alcohol is the gateway drug for me. Every time I ever did a drug in my life for the first time, I was drunk before I did it. First time I smoked a joint, I was drunk. First time I did a line of coke, I was drunk. First time I did a line of heroin, I was drunk. First time I smoked meth, I was drunk. First time it's you get enough Jameson down my throat and everything seems like a great fucking idea. So sure enough, I remember getting out of there and being at the bar that night. Because you got to celebrate getting out of detox.
Yes,
go to the bar, right?
Just like getting out of jail, you need to celebrate.
The girl that I was dating at the time and all my friends came to the bar and they were like, congratulations, we're so proud of you for getting sober. And they were all buying me double makers because I was a big Maker's Mark drinker. They're all buying me double makers. And I'm going right along with it. I'm so delusional at this time that I think as long as I don't have a needle in my arm or a stem in my mouth, I am sober. Everybody drinks, right? Everybody drinks whiskey like it's fucking water from the time their eyes open until they pass out. That's normal. So one night, it was actually the 4th of July. It was almost about 6 months to the day from when that guy told me 6-8 months from now it's going to hit you right between the eyes. I was at a 4th of July party at a bar downtown. The girl I was dating was the bartender. We were going to a big party at some people's house after the bar, and a friend of mine goes, hey man, you look like you're feeling the booze a little bit. I'm like, yeah, I've been here for a while, dude. I'm starting to get a little tipsy. He's like, you want to run out to the car and blow a line? And I was like, absolutely. So we go out to the car, and this was back when we still had CDs in the car, so you always had a CD case to cut lines on. He dumps out a couple bags, cuts each bag into one line. And I'm like, nice. He's like, yeah, fuck it, let's go in. I was like, all right. He goes, turn on the dome light so we can see. And I turned on the dome light, and I looked down at the lines, and they were not white, they were tan. And once I saw they were tan, I hesitated for like a split second. I was like, oh, bro, that's not Coke. And he was like, oh, I thought you're not doing dope anymore. I was like, dude, I haven't done it in like, it's been like fucking 6, 7 months, dude. And he was like, oh man, he's like, if you don't want to do this anymore, dude, he's like, I'm sorry. He's like, I thought you were still doing it. And I was like, it's all right, dude. One line's not gonna hurt anything. So I do the line and then have to convince the girl and everybody that I'm with that night that I
Just drank too much?
That I drank too much and I took a hit of ecstasy because I've just got this nonstop smile on my face and my eyes are just back in my head, and I was like nodded out, but I was trying to act like I was rolling. It was a fucking mess. I don't know, that awakened it in me, but I didn't go right back to it like the next day, but I just kind of stayed good for like another week or two, and then I just happened to run into the guy that I knew that I used to get shit from, and he was like, hey, what's up, man? How you been? I haven't seen you in a while, and I got some really good shit right now. And I was like, you know what? Back then, it was around Chicago, everything was dime bags, so I was like, you know what? 110's not going to hurt. So I threw him $10, and I had a couple beers in me already. Like I said, that's my gateway drug, man. It was off to the races after that. A lot of mess surrounding all that stuff. Got arrested a couple times for thefts. I was robbing houses and shit. I got arrested for that. I got arrested for being in the middle of they were trying to bust the guy that I was getting stuff from. So I got caught with a bunch of paraphernalia and stuff. I hadn't copped from him yet. It was a funny story. We went to do a hand-to-hand out the window, and there had just been an ice storm. So we both slid through the intersection while we were trying to do the hand-to-hand. We both had to go up. They're the old cobblestone streets, so we had to go up to the end of the streets to turn around. We turned around, and all of a sudden an undercover got behind us. He tried to go around us to get to the dude because he knew we were just the junkies copping, and he wanted the main dude. We literally got in the middle of the road and started flashing our lights and honking at the dude to get the fuck out of there. And that we pretty much took the charge for him. We knew we were getting popped anyway, probably, so we just decided to create a distraction so he could get the fuck out of the neighborhood, and he got away. But yeah, it was just nonstop chaos, stuff like that, man. And I ended up on the street again with a whole lot of years hanging over my head because I had been released on pretrial release, and I'd caught either 2 or 3 new cases while I was on pretrial release. And I don't know why they kept letting me fucking on out, dude. You'd think they would have just said, you know what, you're already going to trial for this, we're going to hold you, but every time I got arrested again, they let me bond out again. I didn't learn anything, I just kept getting in more trouble and more trouble. Attempted to get clean, kind of wanted to get clean, definitely didn't want to stop drinking. I wanted to get clean from drugs. Because of the new cases, they ordered me to a treatment, and then they caught me getting high in the treatment because they sent me to treatment in the middle of the west side of Chicago, 2 blocks away from one of the spots that I copped dope at. So the second day that I'm there, I run out of dope because I smuggled dope in. And the second day I run out of dope, and I go out the back door of the kitchen, which was the one door in the whole facility that was unlocked. And I went right to the spot and copped and came back in and fucking nodded out in group. And they knew I was high as shit. And they said, you're going to get warrant. If you just give us your drugs, you can stay. And I was like, I'm not giving you a fucking thing. They were like, well, then you have to leave, and we're going to call the judge. He's going to put a warrant out for you. And I was like, all right, well, it's Friday. By the time the warrant gets fucking through the courts, it'll be Tuesday or Wednesday. By the time all this shit goes down. So, I got 4 or 5 days head start. So catch me if you can. Have a good weekend, guys. And it bounced. Ended up getting picked up on the fucking warrant. And my court officer called me in his office, and I kept thinking that he was gonna have me locked up. That was why they picked me up. And he said, what are you gonna do? And I was like, what do you mean? Thought you were gonna have me arrested. And I kept looking over my shoulder. He's like, why do you keep looking behind you? He's like, if I was gonna have them get you, they'd already cuffed you up. I figured they were just waiting outside the door, and they were gonna cuff me as soon as and he said, no. And I said, well, I got an appointment to check into a detox, man. And he was like, today? I said, yeah. He said, when you get there, you sign a release that they can speak to me so I can verify everything, and we'll go from there. I stopped him on the way out of the office, and I said, you know what? I probably shouldn't ask you this because this is kind of like a fucking suicidal question to ask a court officer, but I'm like, why the fuck do you keep giving me chances, dude? I'm like, seriously, you could have jammed me up 5 fucking times now for failed drug tests, not showing up. I showed up the one day I was so wrecked that I was sliding out of the chair in his office. I've caught 3 new cases. Why do you keep doing this? And he said, I got a younger brother who just celebrated 5 years sober. And he said, you remind me exactly of him. He said, you look like him, you talk like him, you have similar backgrounds, he chose to run the streets and do all this shit. And he said, so I just figure if a fucking knucklehead like him could fucking turn his life around, then there's a chance for you. He said, but this is it. I can't cover for you anymore, man. He said, I could probably get in trouble for covering for you now, but I'm going to. So he gave me a chance, and I came down to Florida the first time. This was 2009. Did not take it serious. I can't say that. I took it serious in the beginning, but once I got to step 9, I had graduated. Everything was good. Everybody forgave me. And, I got the same speed from almost everybody I made amends to that 99% of people get.
Just keep doing
Just
good.
keep doing good. That's all I ever wanted for you. Love you. Don't worry about it. Everything's fine. Just stay sober and, all's forgiven and everything's great. And once I heard that shit, I was like, boom. I don't have to do anything, and I was just not living a good life. I was still lying, cheating, stealing, fucking doing all kinds of scandalous shit. I just didn't have a drink or a drug in my hand, and that only lasted for so long until I ended up getting drunk again. And when that happened, I really shut the door on recovery myself. People always say that they talk about having a head full of AA and a belly full of booze don't mix and all that shit. And it was like, not for me, man. After that second drink goes down, I don't give a fuck about AA or anybody in it. I don't care about recovery. I'm already a lost cause. I'm riding this bitch until the wheels fall off. That was my attitude. And I went back out on the street. Went back north, and same story. Mom, can I sleep on the fucking couch? Can I blah, blah, blah? Mom and Dad said, sure, we don't want you to freeze to death, but you got to get sober again. And at the time, I was just drinking. And I don't say that to say, like, just drinking's any better, but it's more acceptable for me to be a drunken mess that just slurs my words and passes out than it is for me to, like, I don't steal when I'm drinking. You know what I mean? I don't need hundreds of dollars a day to support a generic handle of whiskey habit. It's like $10 for a handle of whiskey, so I don't really have to steal anything. I can actually hold a job until I get drunk enough one day that I don't show up, or I show up drunk or whatever. Well, I got a third shift job working for a friend of mine at a liquor distribution place.
That works.
So, drunk working at a liquor distribution place, anytime there was a cracked case of something, we'd have to throw it out, and throwing it out meant you can drink it. It didn't matter if I went into work with booze on my breath. It didn't matter if I had booze poured in my water bottle. Like, it didn't matter, because we were the only ones there, and everybody there was cool. So I did that for a little while until the wheels fell off on that, because I started, my brilliant idea once I started getting real bad on the booze and started getting the shakes every morning real bad and knew I was on the verge of a seizure every morning when I'd wake up if I didn't start drinking, was I should probably start snorting a little heroin so I can ease back on the booze. A normal person wakes up and goes, wow, I'm drinking too much, I'm starting to get the shakes, I should probably get sober. A person like myself thinks, I'm starting to get the shakes, I should probably drink a little less. Snorting a little heroin will help me taper down on the booze. That brilliant plan of tapering off the booze lasted a couple weeks, and then I'm back full on shooting dope all day, every day, back out on the street. That was when I really started to just not care about anything. Started hanging out with a lot of people that were like from my old gangbanging days, guys on parole for murders and guys on parole for manslaughters, and we're riding around with fucking AKs in the car. I just didn't give a fuck, because I figured one way or another I'm either going to do the rest of my life in prison, I'm going to die from an overdose or a gunshot. Like, I stopped giving a fuck about anything, man. I'd seen a lot of violence before when I was on the streets. This time I saw some people lose their lives right in front of me. I've seen that a few times. It changes you. I don't know how to explain it unless you've seen it. It changes you. It still didn't stop me, though. All that shit did not stop me. And I finally got to the point where I was... It's funny enough, all the bottoms that I went through, because people always say, what was the bottom for you? I'm like, dude, it was the bottom the first time my father said, you're no longer welcome in this house. And I was only son. That was a fucking bottom, dude. Thrown out of the fucking military, basically, for overdosing on leave in uniform. I went into the military with the hopes of serving my country, and ended up overdosing on leave. So that kind of put it into that. There was a bunch of shit that was bottoms.
That normal people would be a life-changing event, but for us,
the ultimate bottom for me, though, was I didn't really have to get sober when I decided to get sober, man. It wasn't working anymore. I was working for a guy, allegedly, so I got free dope all day, and I actually made money because our little deal we had worked out was pretty sweet. I never had to worry about being dope sick. Always had enough money to buy some crack so I could actually get high, because at that point the dope's not even getting me high anymore. It's just
not being sick.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't anything that I'm proud or bragging or boastful about in any way, but I mean, my wake up shot to get my sick off was 15 bags. And that's how my shots were throughout the day. I did, in Chicago we call it a jab. It's either 12 or 15 bags depending on which spot you go to. My normal shot was a jab, like the whole jab. I couldn't get high anymore. And even when I was shooting speedballs, I could not get high anymore, to the point where I didn't want to die. And the thing that had been working for me since I got drunk on vodka at 12 years old the chemicals no longer worked. They no longer took away that feeling of I just want to fucking die. So I reached out to the guy that had been my sponsor when I was down here in 2009. Like I said, this is October of 2013. So from 2009 when I relapsed to 2013, I was on the street once again. I was on the street on and off for about 15 years total, which comes into play now because I work with homeless services, because I know what it's like to be on the street and be strung out and not have a dime and not have family want anything to do with you, and all the stuff that the people that I work with are going through. Kind of makes sense. My whole journey makes sense now. But I reached out to him and he said, if you can get a ride to Florida, if you can somehow get to Florida, plane ticket, bus ride, whatever, I can find a detox that'll scholarship you. You know, this was 2013. Scholarships were, at that time, pretty easy to come by for a detox or treatment. Now it's about like trying to pull a brick out of the wall with your teeth. You know, insurance has stopped paying for most stuff. I mean, there's probably, I can think of probably 30 or 40 treatment centers that I knew of when I got sober that are no longer around, you know, because insurance just doesn't want to pay anything anymore. It's a combination, I think, of
All the scams that went down.
the scams that went down, and the other thing is, and I'm going to piss some people off with this next remark, but I'm just going to say the fucking truth. Treatment doesn't work. If treatment worked, little Johnny wouldn't have to go to treatment 37 fucking times.
Absolutely.
Treatment is a place to separate you from the chemicals. That's it. If you get out of there and don't do any work on your spiritual condition, you'll go back to the fucking chemicals. Because sitting around in groups all day talking about how your dad didn't hug you enough when you were a fucking kid might feel like a weight got lifted off your chest for those 20 days that you're there. Because it ain't even 28 or 30 days anymore. You're normally there like fucking 3 weeks at the most. Then your insurance goes, yeah, we're not paying for this kid anymore. Get the fuck out. But it doesn't do anything to change your internal condition. It doesn't give me that spiritual connection that I've wanted since I was a little kid, that all of us have. That's what we were searching for in that bottle of booze, that fucking bag of dope, that crack pipe, whatever it was. I realized looking back that the whole time I was looking for something. You know, I laugh about it when I think about it. Like I'd go to like a Grateful Dead show or a rave with a group of friends, and they're like, I'm gonna eat a hit of acid and trip on a light show. I'm like, I'm gonna eat 15 and try to touch God. I'm here to do work. You're here to trip out on lights. I'm not here for the light show. I'm here to try to touch the other side of things. So even then, I was searching for some kind of a spiritual experience. You know, insurance companies have finally said, why do we keep paying for this? It doesn't work. We've got less than 5% of people going to treatment and staying sober for any length of time. Would they pay a heart surgeon if 95 out of 100 of his patients died on the table? They probably wouldn't pay $100,000 an hour for this guy doing heart surgery if 95 out of 100 of his patients died on the fucking table. And here's the funny thing. What's the main thing that's emphasized in most treatment centers nowadays? Go to AA when you get out of here. They beat that shit into your head for 30 days. I think we know what the solution is. It's just we need a place to get separated. I don't try to bash treatment too much because there's some that are doing the deal, but there's so many that are just collecting checks for nothing. It's you might as well have got somebody a room at the fucking Ritz with a security guard for what you're paying to be there, and you're not getting any new knowledge. You're not getting any new information. You're gonna get a big book that costs you fucking $60,000. You know, I'll give you a big book for free. Anyway, I made my way back down to Florida. I asked my family if they give me a plane ticket, and they said that's the only time in your life since you were 12 years old that you've drawn a sober breath. So yes, we'll get you a plane ticket. If you don't get on the plane, we will get a no contact order permanently. So if you even call our phones, you go to jail. I said, I'll get on the plane. I got on the plane, I got down here, went to go to the detox that the guy got me into, and they did the physical. They told me to go wait in the front of the medical office. And I sat out there for like a half hour or so, and finally they came out, and the nurse said, okay, I need to talk to you. And I said, what's going on? She said, we can't take you. And I was like, if this is about money, you knew I didn't have any money or any insurance. I've been sleeping in the fucking park in abandoned houses. Like, and they said, no, it doesn't have anything to do with money. We're scholarshiping you. They said, after doing a physical examination of you and looking at the way that you look and your vitals and everything else, we can't detox you here. You'll definitely be seizing within the next 6 hours, and you may pass away. And I said, so what am I supposed to do? And they said, you're going to have to detox in the ICU at the hospital. And I got up and started staggering out the front door. This because I was a fucking wreck. I started staggering out the front door, and they were like, no, we're pulling a van around for you. We're going to take you there and like make sure you're admitted and all that. We're not just going to tell it, because I was like, which way do I walk? And they were like, no, we got you. So I went to the hospital, and I got I'd have to look at my medical records. Either 4 or 5 days that I was there, seizing, fucking, it was horrible, dude. It was absolutely horrible because I was coming off everything. I was drinking a lot at the time, so seizing, it was bad. I'll never forget the nurse saying, if you have to use the bathroom, there's a bedpan here. Don't worry about it. We've seen everything. We'll clean it up. And so the first time I had to take a piss, I'm like, oh, I'm a grown-ass man. I'm not pissing in a fucking bedpan. So I go to stand up 1.5 steps from the bed, and I woke up face first on the mattress. I remember going, oh shit, and then I woke up on the mattress with the nurse jabbing a needle full of Ativan into my shoulder, and I turned around, I turned my head and looked, and it was, I'll never forget my nurse, his name was Julian, he was a big Jamaican guy. I go, Julian, what the fuck happened? He goes, man, you're flopping like a fish on the floor. He goes, I told you, man, just piss in the pan. I got you, bro. I got you. And I was like, I didn't even make it to the... He's like, you didn't make it close to the fucking bathroom, man. He's like, I just happened to be walking by and I heard you hit the fucking floor and I look over and you're flopping like a fish. You're having seizures, man. We told you. You're probably going to have a seizure at some point. During the 4 or 5 days that I was in there, I lost my scholarship because it wasn't anybody's fault, but it was just a lack of communication at some point, like between the hospital and the treatment center. Letting them, they were supposed to update them, like when I was going to get released, because they were holding a bed for me to go to treatment. They gave it away because they thought like AMA'd or something. They thought I just left the hospital. So when I was getting discharged, I called them. They're like, "Oh, no, we gave the bed away, and we don't have another one. We got a female bed open, but we can't give you that one."
Take it.
And I was like, "I'll take it. Put me in the girls' door." No, they said, you know, all we have open is a female bed. And I was like, okay. So I hung up and I called the guy that had sponsored me before, that I had asked to sponsor me again, and he said, you know what, I'm going to send one of your sponsee brothers. I just got off the phone with him. He's going to a meeting. I'm going to tell him to swing by the hospital and pick you up on the way to the meeting. You guys will still make it on time. We'll figure it out, man. We'll figure it out this afternoon, whether you go to a different treatment place or we just go to halfway. He's like, do you feel detox? I was like, crazy enough, dude. Yeah. I was like, I actually feel like I actually got detox. Like the protocol that they used, which they used a lot of benzos and a lot of methadone, it worked. And I didn't leave there like with a methadone addiction or a benzo addiction. You know, it was like they used just the right amounts to where it wasn't super painful and it wasn't pleasant enough to where I wanted more of it. St. Mary's in West Palm.
Jesus. I never heard anyone that needed ICU to detox. That's...
Yeah, I didn't know. I asked him at one point. I didn't really know exactly where I was because I was, like I said, I was fucked up when I got there and I wasn't really paying attention. I'm just kind of laying in bed all day. I finally was like, can I please go outside and have a cigarette? And the lady was like, are you serious right now? And I was like, yeah. She's like, okay, first off, you're hooked up to like 5 different machines. She's like, second off, do you realize where you're at right now? And I was like, no. And she goes, well, the guy in the bed in the room on the left-hand side of you was shot 4 times in the head. The guy in the bed on the right side of you was shot twice in the head. And the guy across from you was in a major pileup on 95. Does that kind of paint a clearer picture of how bad off you are? And I was like, okay, I guess I won't be going out to have a cigarette. So I got out of there and I went to a meeting, man. I was talking to somebody before the meeting and they said, you know what you need to do is put your hand up when they say, is there any non-AA announcements? And just very briefly, take the meeting over for 20 minutes, but just very briefly put your hand up and say, hi, my name's Chris, I'm an alcoholic, I just got out of the hospital. I was supposed to go to treatment, but that got canceled, so I don't know what I'm going to do. Does anybody have any suggestions? See me after the meeting. So I did that. Young guy came up to me after the meeting and he said, dude, this is going to sound crazy. And I said, I don't really care, dude. I'm open to anything at this point. Hit me with your craziest suggestion. And he's like, all right, don't think I'm a nut job or anything. I'm like, aren't we all fucking nut jobs? That's why we're here. And he started laughing and he said, you're supposed to be at the halfway house I'm at. And he said, don't ask me how I know it, dude, but I know you're supposed to be at the halfway house I'm at. He said, I need you to call this guy that owns the place right now. And he gave me a guy named Neil Timmons. He gave me his number. And I will forever be grateful to Neil Timmons. He took me in with $62 and a bag full of dirty clothes. Doesn't begin to describe it. The last year I was on the street, I took 3 showers. 1, 2, 3 showers in a year. And I had done no laundry. So I wore those clothes every day for a year after showering 3 times. There was no deodorant or toothbrush in my life at that point. And he wouldn't even take the $62, man. I tried to give him the $62 and he said, dude, you smoke? I said, yeah. He said, you're going to need cigarettes and a lot of fucking peanut butter and noodles and shit. So he took me to the store and he actually paid for a bunch of groceries for me because the $62 wasn't going very far. He goes, dude, get a 5-6 packs of smokes and then we'll figure out the rest. He's like, get some of this, get some of this, get some of this. And he took me in, man. I knew something was different when I got to this halfway, man, because I've been in halfways before. And normally you walk into a halfway house and the ones that I've been in before, there's like a bunch of Monster cans on everything, and everybody's got a vape everywhere that they're half taken apart, half building, because this was back before the gas station vapes, back when you had to roll coils and all that shit. So he's got setups
dump
like
the
that.
liquid in.
And you go in the bathroom and there's a fucking stack of fucking porno mags next to the toilet. This place wasn't like that, dude. This place was clean and everything was nice. And every flat surface that I could see, there was a big book. Like all different sizes. There was like the little ones that are like the size of a pack of smokes that you put in your pocket. And then they had the regular hardcover books, and then they had the great big telephone style books with the big bold print in them. And I got a chill down the back of my spine. I said, something different's going on here, man. This is something different. Came to find out that the newest guy in there had about 6 months sober. He said everybody there, he said that was why he hesitated at first to take me in, was because everybody had, you know, somewhere between 60 and 90 days when they stepped foot in that house because they came from detox treatment, PHP, IOP type programs. And he said, you got like 4 days sober, dude. You didn't even go to treatment this time. I said, I'd been to treatment a number of times in the past. I said, I just, you know, this time I didn't go. He said, okay. And those guys on the first night, they took me out back on the porch and they said, so what's your problem, man? And not in a rude way. They were just like, so what's your thing? What's your problem? They said, what do you think your problem is? And I said, depending on the year, man, I said, you know, this last several years, it's been heroin, alcohol, crack, and a lot of Xanax bars. They said, do you have any of that stuff in your system right now? And I said, no, dude, I'm totally detoxed. And they said, how do you feel? And I said, batshit crazy. I want to cut my skin off and be a skeleton running down the street screaming on fire. And they said, good. And I said, it doesn't feel too fucking good for where I'm sitting. And they said, no, we just established that your problem is not any of the chemicals that you just named because you don't have any of that shit in your system and you're still crazy. And I said, so what do you think the problem is? And they opened the book to We Agnostics and threw it on the table. And they said, lack of power is your problem. They said, when you don't have any of that shit in your system, are you a good son? Are you a good employee? Are you a good friend? Are you a good boyfriend? Are you a good... And I was like, no, dude, I'm like a shit human being. Basically, at this point, I've kind of accepted that. And they were like, cool, it's because you got no power in your life. You need to find some power, and that's what this book is going to direct you to, some power. And my ears perked up. Neil came by and he said, cool, man, well, if you're not on a 4th step by next week, then I'll be sponsoring you and you'll be on a 4th step by next week. So I met with my sponsor the next day and we went over steps 1, 2, and 3 in about an hour. He threw a pen and a piece of paper on the table and he said, I want you to draw 3 lines and then I want you to start writing. And he said, first column, who? Second column, why are you pissed at them? 8 words or less. I don't want a huge explanation. I want to know why you're pissed off at them. Then the 3rd column, I want to know what parts of your life you think it's affecting. And then the 4th column, I want to know where you being selfish, frightened, self-seeking, and dishonest. And I thought he was going to leave, and he just stood there. And I said, what, oh, you mean now? He goes, yeah, start writing right now. And I was like, okay. He's like, it's been my experience that when I have guys actually start writing, they'll keep writing. If I just throw you some notebook paper and say, call me when your 4th step's done, next thing I get a phone call says you're dead. He had me start writing, and after I had written out a resentment, he said, I want you to do one of each. And he showed me how to do the first resentment, write that one out. Then he threw down the fears, and he said, I want to know your first fear. Don't think about it. Just write it down, and why do you have it? Did that, then he threw down the next one. He said, now, relationships, and he made it very clear. He said, I don't want a fucking one-night stand list. This is not your chance to puff up your chest and talk about how big of a fucking player you were. He said, I don't give a shit if you were 21 years old at a nightclub and you took some girl home. I don't care about that. He said, the book says we put each relationship to this test. When you were in a serious relationship with someone, how did you use sexual powers to your advantage? Whether it was by fooling someone, did you ever make a girl think that you liked her so she'd let you borrow her car, stuff like that. And so I put the first one on there, and then he stood up and looked at me and he said, today is Tuesday. You need to be calling me by Friday with all 3 of these inventories finished, and we'll do your 5th step on Saturday. And I said, okay. That was the first of many okays that changed my life, because I always had something to reply to people with. Whenever they tell them that I wanted to get sober, I tell them that I wanted help, I tell them that I wanted this, and then they tell me what to do, and I'd always have a fucking response. But you don't understand. Mine different. I just blah, blah, and finally I just started saying fucking okay. I was out of road, man. I was completely out of road. I was out of cards to play, and it was like, okay, just tell me what the fuck to do, and I'll do it, dude. I made the joke one day that I said, if that dude he didn't tell me to do any weird shit that wasn't in the book. He went strictly by the book. But I said, if he would have told me in order to stay sober for another month, I'm going to need you to go down on US 1 and take your toothbrush and clean the median in a fucking yellow thong, I would have asked him what shade of yellow was necessary for that cleaning job. So he took me through the work, man. We went through the 5th step, and he looked over at me, and he said, do you think we figured out what the problem? I said, yeah, I think we figured out what the problem was. He goes, dude, you're a fucking asshole. He goes, everything you just read to me, he's like, how could you look at all that shit you just wrote and what we just went over and not come to the conclusion that you're a fucking asshole. And I was like, I don't know, it's blaringly obvious. You know, the whole time I'm sitting here pointing fingers around at all these people, and it's me. We went over 6 and 7. He told me, start on the amends list. You've got 1 day to work on your amends list. Started making amends the day after that, 1 day, and then he taught me how to effectively use 10, 11, and 12. The one thing that I had a problem with was step 11. I just could not meditate, because he made it very clear to me that meditation was not an option. Because everybody says, oh, you ask them if they practice step 11. They're like, yeah, I pray. I'm like, do you meditate? And they're like, no, I can't do that. It says prayer and meditation, not prayer or. We don't get to pick and choose, right? Funny thing is, I've met people that have sponsored people that have relapsed. I've met people that went to meetings every day that relapsed. I've never met anybody that meditated every single morning and relapsed. Even if they didn't do all the other shit right. Even if they weren't sponsoring guys. Even if they hardly went to meetings anymore. If they meditated every morning, somehow they stayed sober. Might be something to that.
That is such a valuable point.
I had a friend of mine, I told him that I was having trouble trying to meditate, and he said, you're a gym guy. I said, yeah. He said, the first time you walked in the gym, did you bench 315? I said, fuck no, not even close. Nobody does. He said, no, you start out with the bar, and then you add a couple fives, then you add a couple tens, and then finally you get up to a plate, and then you get up to a plate and a quarter. And I said, yeah, you progressively overload until you get up to where you want to be. And he said, yeah, you didn't walk into the gym and bench 300 or 400 pounds. Because you'd never done it before. Why would you think, having never meditated before in your life, that you're going to be on the side of a mountain in lotus position for the next 3 hours, scrubbing the face of God? Why do you think that that's going to happen in that when it doesn't happen in any other area? He said if you take about 12 deep breaths with a big pause between the inhale and the exhale, get silent and still, and take about 12 deep breaths, he said that's about 2 minutes. So start out with 2 minutes. And when you can do that with no problem, go to 4 minutes. And when you can do that with no problem, go to 6 or 8 minutes and just keep building up from there. So I started doing that, and I finally got up to where I was doing about a half hour at a time, no headphones, no nothing. And I could go for right around a half hour. Well, finally the one day I was still having a lot of uncomfortability. I didn't want to get high or anything, but I just was not comfortable. And I know from experience that if I stay uncomfortable long enough, my brain inevitably says, you know what would make you comfortable? Just one triple Jameson. Just soothe everything away. And that was how I'd always get sucked back into it, because I'd think, yeah, you know what, a couple drinks,
This time will be different.
I never stole everything in the planet for a couple of drinks. Like, I never went to prison for a couple of drinks. I never did this for a couple of drinks. Everything would tell me, you're going to be fine, it's just a couple of drinks. And then I have a couple of drinks, and for me, about that third or fourth drink, I look at the bottom of the glass, and there's a crack dealer's phone number, and then I get all cracked out, and I got to come down from that. So then I got to do a shot of dope, and before I know it, I'm back daily using again. So I got to the point where I said, you know what, I'm just going to try to get rid of this feeling today. I'm going to go for as long as I can. And I went for about somewhere between 40 and 45 minutes. I don't know exactly. I didn't look at the clock that specifically, but I know it was somewhere around 40, 45 minutes. And I heard a voice say, open your eyes, which freaked me out because there was nobody home at the time. I was on the sun porch out back by myself. I heard it again say, open your eyes. And I opened my eyes, and everything was glowing. It was like something out of a movie, man. I could see like the molecules in the air. It was reminded me of like the best psychedelic visuals I'd ever had in my life. I heard a voice say, enough of the bullshit, it's over. And I felt like something was cleaved from my spirit. Something evil was pulled out of me. And I staggered off the back porch out into the backyard, and I looked, and everything was blindingly vivid color. And everything had been gray for years and years. No matter how sunny the day was, it was gray. And all of a sudden, everything was colorful, and I felt this sense of peace that I'd been looking for since I was 12 years old with that bottle of vodka. And I went, holy shit, I think I'm going to be okay. And I called my sponsor, and I told him what happened. The funny thing is, I was like, oh my God. And then I saw everything, and all of a sudden everything's clear, and like, there's no desire to drink or get high anymore. And he goes, all right. And he just sat there. And I was like, dude, did you hear what I just told you? He goes, yeah, that's what we were going for, dude. Welcome. Welcome. I was like, okay. So I was sober for a couple of months, and I went to a meeting down the street from the halfway I was living at, down in Boynton. Got introduced to this little blonde girl. I actually saw her in a meeting, and I was like, I want to spend the rest of my life with that girl. The second I looked at her, I was like, I'm going to spend the rest of my life with that girl. After the meeting, her sponsor brought her over to me. I was friends with her sponsor, and her sponsor brought her over to me and said, hey, I just wanted to introduce you guys. She's actually looking for a new job, and I had just started a new job, and they were, at the time, they had been hiring a few people, and she said, are they still hiring at your place? And I said, I can see. And she said, well, why don't you guys swap numbers, and you can maybe hook her up with a job. So I checked on the job, and they unfortunately were not hiring them, but they said they may be hiring in a couple of weeks. Then she totally 13th stepped the shit out of me, hit on me, and I said, I think we should probably get together and talk about our future. We should get together and talk about things. We had our first date, and that was going on 13 years ago, man. We've been together ever since. What we have been through in the last 13 years would have been unimaginable for me to say that I stayed sober through it, if not for God's grace and the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. There's no fucking way, dude. I would get high over anything. I didn't need a reason. People always talk about triggers. Triggers. I told
breathing.
Somebody, I finally figured out what my ultimate trigger was after all those years of fucking therapist couches. Fucking oxygen, dude. I wake up in the morning and I take that second breath, and it feels like there's a fucking midget standing on my throat and I can't get a full breath. And then I slam a couple drinks or I do a shot of dope, and all of a sudden I can go and I get a full breath. And now I have enough confidence to walk into Publix and steal a fucking bagel to eat for breakfast. So yeah, we started dating, and then we moved in together, and we had been living together for a while. My wife, myself, and my mother-in-law shared a place because we lived on the intercoastal. Pricey, but the three of us could make it work if we all pitched in. One day, Karen's my mother-in-law. She didn't feel well. I knew something was wrong because she would always have us record her shows. Well, she was a retired RN, but she still did some home health for a lady. She would spend the night at the lady's house, and so she would miss some of her favorite shows while she was taking care of this lady. So when she'd come home, she'd want to watch her shows, and we'd sit around and shoot the shit and make some dinner and watch her shows. And she started watching. About 20 minutes in, she said, I don't feel well. I think I'm going to lay down. And I was like, whoa, that's never happened before. And she went in the other room, and my wife and I both asked her a couple times if she was okay, because we heard her vomit a couple times. And she said, yeah, I think it's something I ate, or I just got the flu or something, and I just don't feel well. We said something about going to the hospital, and she pretty much laughed. You're not going to talk an RN into going to the fucking ER, dude. Good luck with that. Like, absolutely not. Then she yelled for my wife to call 911. She was totally conscious, just a little out of it seemed like, and she went to the back of the ambulance, and we got to the hospital. She had a massive stroke in front of us in the emergency room. She had already had probably at least one stroke, but then she had a really bad one there. She had 3 brain bleeds, so she had 3 strokes that day. They said, we need to get her back to the MRI. They came back out and said, unfortunately, she's on a ventilator. She's lost consciousness, and if she ever regains consciousness, she will not be the woman that you knew. And we were like, you got the room numbers mixed up, dude, because we were just laughing and joking with her like a half hour ago at the house. So there's no way you got the right person. My wife and I laid on the floor in the hallway of that hospital, and we were both bawling so hard I thought we were both going to have seizures. There's a hell of a lot of nights that I had when I was drinking and using that I'll trade that day for any fucking time. That's why it absolutely kills me when I hear somebody say, oh, your worst day sober is better than your best day drinking. Nah, dude, you haven't been through some of the shit that we've been through, I guess. God bless you if every day you're sober is just the fucking pig's nuts, but ours hasn't been. And unfortunately, my wife relapsed then. It was a few years that she was fighting to come back. And she kept asking me why I didn't give up on her, because she'd put together a little bit of time, and then she'd relapse, and at the end she was trying to intentionally overdose, even though she's a crack smoker. But when carfentanil came around and everybody was dropping dead from it, she was like, well, that'll be an easy way to go out. She just said, I just want to be with my mom. She said, I'm sorry, I just miss her so much. And I understand, because I can't talk about my mother-in-law nowadays without getting tears in my eyes. I can't imagine if I had known her even better and for even longer. So, and I know we'd all love to think that we'll stay sober through no matter what life throws at us. It's been my experience watching people around me that sometimes the pain inside is so great that they can't. And I've told people before, man, if it ever comes down to the point where you're going to drink a 12-pack of Heineken or you're going to blow your fucking brains out, drink the beer, because I can help you get sober again, but you squeeze the trigger and there's not a fucking thing I can do for you. But yeah, she made it back. And then she was just about 3 years sober. She was having some memory issues. She had cancer. She's been cancer-free for almost 12 years now. Still, you go like once every 12 to 18 months to get scanned to make sure that there's no regrowth of any of the cancerous cells. Well, normally they said they just did the MRI from like neck to knees, just the vital organs, because that's where the cancer was. But this time she had noted that she had been having memory issues, and she was filling out the paperwork, and she looked at me and said, do you ever walk into the kitchen and, you forget why you're going in there? I was like, yeah, of course. You're like, what the fuck did I come in here for? She said, how often does that happen to you? I said, I don't know. I don't keep track of it. Maybe like, a couple times a week, a few times a week. She said it's happened to me like 3 or 4 times an afternoon every day. And I was like, okay, that's something different. So they said this time with the memory stuff, we want to do a brain scan as well. And they did a brain scan, and they said, we found arterial venous malformation. It's basically when the artery and the vein start to grow together, and the pressure from that, because blood is going in one direction with the artery and one direction with the vein, the pressure buildup from that will cause that to burst, and you will have a stroke. And they said, given your family history with your mother and your aunt passing away a year before from the same thing, this is a hereditary thing. We think we figured out what runs in your family. So she has had 3 brain surgeries since then. It's affected her memory and her speech. For about a year after the first procedure, if you see her at meetings, she would never share, she would never speak. If they ask her, can you read even the smallest reading, she would say no thank you, because she got words backwards and would get halfway through a sentence and couldn't complete the sentence and stuff like that. Fortunately, it's gotten better, but every time they've done a procedure, it's like she takes a little step back. It's like she gets better, and then they do a procedure, and then it takes a little step back. So we just had the last one in July of this year, so she's doing much better. But we've been through a lot, man. But I can honestly tell you this, at no point did either one of us think, let's just go get fucked up. We just didn't. She was like, I'm so grateful that I'm sober. Because they literally told us when they found the thing, the doctor said, I got asked, either one of you guys use like illegal drugs or anything? And we both started dying laughing. And he's like, I'm guessing at one point, I'm like, dude, we're both in recovery. We both, I'm like, she, like I said, she had like, I think 3 years sober at the time. I had like 7 or 8 years sober at the time or something like that. And I'm like, so we've both been sober for a good chunk of change, and we don't plan on going back on. He's like, that's good. He goes, what was your thing? And my wife said, oh, it was crack cocaine. And he was like, yeah, when most people find out that they have this, if they use drugs, it's when they take a big hit of crack cocaine and then it bursts and then they die. Given where it's at in your head, there's a 97% chance that you would be dead before your body hit the ground. And on the 3% chance that you survived, you would never be able to talk or remember anything again. And I tried to make the joke about 50 first dates. I'm like, so she'd wake up every couple of days and not know who I was. He's like, dude, she wouldn't know who you were about every 20 minutes. But she wouldn't even be able to tell you that because she wouldn't be able to speak. It's been a hell of a journey, man, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. And I can't express to people how easy it's been to stay sober, dude. I mean, honestly, it has not been. It just kills me every time I hear one of these celebrities on a fucking interview talking about, it's a fight every day. I'm like, what program did you use? The people that I know that have taken the 12 steps directly out of the book, they don't fight to stay sober every day. They don't. If I had to fight to stay sober every day, dude, I would have gotten high a long fucking time. I would have gotten high the night that we were in the hospital watching my mother-in-law pass away. I would have gotten high multiple times every time I had to bring my wife to Miami and go walk around the fucking hospital for 4 hours while they put wires and fucking all kinds of stuff into her head to do procedures on her. I would have copped dope in Miami and fucking, because I wouldn't have been able to handle it. It's never seemed like a good idea. I can honestly say that. Over 12 years now, it's just not there, dude. And it's not that I make a choice. That kills me when I hear people say that you just got to make a choice to not get high today. If I could make a choice to not get high, I would have made it before I destroyed my entire fucking life, dude. I made that choice a million times, and I got high 1,000,001. The book's very specific on page 24. It says, we have lost the power of choice. We can't play the tape through and remember how bad it got. It says, the memories don't come back with enough force to deter me, right? It says, I can't bring into mind with sufficient consciousness, with sufficient force, the memories and the suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago. I'm without defense. The only thing that keeps me sober is God, dude. It's the only thing that keeps me sober. And to stay connected with God, it's not real complicated, man. It's really not. For me anyway, I get up in the morning, I do the same thing that I've done since the day I got sober. I do the 3rd step prayer and the 7th step prayer, which, mystery killer for you here, it's one prayer. That's why there's no amen at the end of the 3rd step prayer, because the 3rd step prayer and the 7th step prayer are one prayer. It's got the work in the middle of it. You do the 3rd step prayer, you do the work, you end it with the 7th step prayer, and then you go out and make amends. The amen, if you look in the book, is at the end of the 7th step prayer. It's because it's the same prayer. You don't say amen at the end of the 3rd step prayer. It says, may I do thy will always. And then at the end of the 7th step prayer, it says amen. I do the 3rd step prayer and the 7th step prayer the way it's written in the book, and then I do prayers for individual people. I pray for my family, I pray for my wife, I pray for my stepson, I pray for some friends of mine, I pray for my clients at work, I pray for the people I work with, I pray for different family members. That's it, man. I go to a meeting a couple times a week, sponsor some guys, I meditate every morning for about 20 minutes, a half hour, something like that. Get up, I do the prayer, I meditate, and then I go about my day. And the thought of getting high has never once been taken seriously. If I have a fleeting thought of getting high, because I work with people all the time that may or may not have alcohol or drug problems, and the subject comes up, or every once in a while I'm dealing with somebody that's visually impaired, or, smell them from across the room, or I can see them. I never think, wow, that'd be a good idea. What a great day to, fuck everything off. It's just not there, man.
I always tell people to stay away from relationships. And there's people like you, people like Mike and Carrie. But I was 13 step. I had a girl at Artesian. First got there, wasn't too concerned about working the steps or anything, but she's a redhead and I love them. It's been 6 years and we've had ups and downs. She's gone back out and people always ask, why didn't you just get rid of her completely? Because there's always something in there. I knew that she had it in her. She just needed it to get bad enough to do the work herself. Luckily, we don't live together, which is the best thing for us.
She asked me multiple times when she was relapsing, why are you staying with me? Why are you not giving up on me? Because I'd go somewhere and speak. When we lived down south, I was speaking a lot of places. I'd get home from speaking, and she's sitting at the kitchen table smoking crack.
That's weird.
And she's like, how are you not giving up on me? Why are you not, because you fuck up, and then the next day, you're back at a meeting. Or 2 days later, you're back at a meeting, and you're saying, I want to try again, and she'd try again and get a little bit of time, and then the pain would just get so great that she would, she was prolonging doing the work, which I don't advise anybody to do, man. That's why anytime you hear me speak anywhere, and anytime you hear me share anywhere, do the work quickly. The steps were intended to be worked quickly. I will never back off of that. I will never debate that with anybody. I've had people stop me after I've spoken places, especially old New York people. Old New York people have this thing about taking forever to get through the fucking steps. I gotta say, if you can take a long time to get through the steps, we probably don't have the same illness. Everybody in AA is not alcoholic. Everybody in DAA is not a drug addict. Just because you had to detox from Percocets don't mean you're a fucking drug addict. It means you were physically hooked on Percocets. You might not be a drug addict. I worked at a treatment center that had an old folks wing, and all those people came in hooked on medications. Because their doctors were overprescribing them. And once they finally got detoxed, they said, I'll never touch that shit again. And about 99.9% of them didn't, because they weren't drug addicts. They were overprescribed elderly people that had a surgery and had a surgeon that was just writing them an endless prescription for Percocets from a shoulder surgery they had 3 years ago. There's a difference between someone that is physically hooked on a substance and someone that's an actual drug addict.
The guy who gets the DUI and has to go to an AA meeting is not an alcoholic.
Dude, one of my friends in high school got like 3 or 4 DUIs when we were in high school. The dude's not an alcoholic, but he would get pulled over for speeding because he had a really fast car, and he was 18 years old with beer on his breath, so they'd give him a fucking DUI. Dude's not an alcoholic. DUIs don't count as a reason for you to be an alcoholic. The book asks 2 questions. Do you overshoot the mark when you're using or drinking? Can you guarantee me how much you're going to use or drink every time? Or do you say, I'm going to have 3 beers and you have 15? Do you say, I'm going to spend $20 on Coke and spend fucking 200, 300? And then it says, when you want to quit entirely, can you do that? That's the only 2 questions it asks. I see some of these websites, they have like 100 questions. Are you an alcoholic? Take this quiz. I'm like, I got 2 questions for you, man. Do you drink or use more than you intended to frequently? And do you go back on your decision once you said, that's it, I'm done, I'm stopping? Can you stay stopped for good? There you have it. It's really easy to determine that. But she asked me why I didn't give up on her, man. I said, dude, I don't know, man. Where I grew up, we got a name for people that give up on people they love just because times get tough. We call them a fucking pussy. I don't know about you, man. My mom raised a whole lot of things, but not a fucking coward. I said, as long as you keep trying, I will stay by your side. We'll stay by your side until they close the fucking lid on my box. We'll respect your wishes if you say, I want to just run the street and fucking be a crackhead criminal or whatever you want to be. If you say, that's it, I'm giving up on life and I just want to jack it all off. Okay, you're a grown woman, I'm a grown man, we'll part ways friends. But as long as you're still trying, I'll be by your side until the fucking curtains close on this show. I'd say it worked out pretty good, man. Everything worked out the way it was supposed to. always tell people, though, get through those steps with a sense of urgency. I can tell you this beyond a shadow of a doubt. My first 3 years in the program, I studied the history of Alcoholics Anonymous. Obscure shit that nobody really cares about, I did. I've got like 2-3 bookshelves full of stuff that was written about AA that is not by AA. Different members' perspectives, all kinds of stuff. The first 100, which the big book is based on the experience of the first 100, the longest that any one of them took to be through the steps and out there sponsoring others is 12 days. Within 2 weeks, every single member of Alcoholics Anonymous was through the 12 steps and sponsoring other people. And those guys were staying sober. Mm-hmm. And today you go into meetings and you hear people talking about working a fucking step a month or a step a year, or this insane shit, and we're burying everybody. If I don't get to God quickly, then that obsession will tell me it's okay. This time will be different. You can do just one. And just one nowadays could be curtains. Mm-hmm. You know, this isn't 20 or 30 years ago where you did $10 worth of heroin.
We had real drugs.
Yeah, you did really $10 worth of heroin and you got hooked again and went back to detox. Now you do $10 worth of Fetty and they find you blue on the floor of a shitty hotel room.
Can you explain the time you have on your own will until you relapse and why you need to work the steps in that time?
That was the question that stopped me in my tracks, man, and changed the way that I thought about the entire program. Was my first sponsor, God rest his soul. He passed away from lung cancer just after giving me my 1-year medallion. So I've had another sponsor since then for the last 11 years. But my first sponsor looked at me and he said, how long do you last on your own power? Once you're fully detoxed, once all the shit's out of your system, and I don't care whether you went to a detox or you just got out of county or you just got out of the hospital or wherever you got everything out of your system, once you're fully detoxed, how long do you last on your own power? And I said, man, honestly, somewhere between 14, 21 days at the most. I could not pick up a 30-day chip. The one time in my life that I got a 30-day chip was when I was at a court-ordered place that was locked down. That we didn't even go out to meetings. They brought meetings into us. So we didn't leave the property. And I got a 30-day chip in there in one of the meetings that they brought into us. And I think I got high on the way home from that place or the next day. I got drunk and then I got high. And he said, there's our timeline. The length of time that you last on your own power, that 14 to 21 days, we need to have you through the book and connected with God. Otherwise, you will go back out. You've got a track record that shows you go out after 2 or 3 weeks. And looking at statistics and looking at, I worked in treatment for about 9 years after I got sober, before I switched over to social services. And my wife and I owned a sober living for females at one point. That's about the timeline, man. If you ask anybody that works in a detox, they see the same people come in about every 3-4 weeks, if they survive. You see people you're in a halfway house. You see somebody go out about every 2 or 3 weeks. They just got out of treatment, they're there about 2 or 3 weeks, boom, back out the door. Because that feeling inside gets so uncomfortable that even though they know they're going to get thrown out, even if they know they got a warrant out for them, even if they know all the consequences in the world will not keep us sober. And that's why I always laugh. You said something about the relationship thing. This is something I bring up whenever that topic comes up. Did you get high when you were single? Yeah. Did you get high when you were in a relationship? Yeah. So what the fuck does that have to do with anything, man? I've heard sponsors tell me if their sponsee gets a girlfriend that they tell them they won't sponsor him anymore. I'm like, who the fuck died and left you God, dude? To tell this kid that he can't date anybody. He was getting high when he was single. He's getting high in a relationship. It doesn't matter. None of the outside shit matters. It's the inside shit that matters. I've heard my sponsor do it at conventions with 1,000 people sitting in the crowd. Did you get high when you were in a relationship? Yeah. Did you get high when you were single? Yeah. He said, everybody put your hands up. Did you get high when you were making a lot of money? Did you get high when you were homeless? Did you get high when you lived in a nice place? Did you get high when you lived in the park? Did you get high when you had a nice car? Did you get high when you were taking the city bus? Our external situation does not matter whether we're getting high or not. You know, I'm a huge Bears fan. I did not get high when it wasn't football season. I didn't stop drinking because I didn't have a reason to drink on Sunday afternoons. You got to drink if your team wins, right? And if they lose, you got to drink and go, oh, what the fuck? I can't believe we lost that game. It wasn't like I didn't drink when it wasn't football season. I drank year round. I don't need anything outside to change for me to have the desire to drink. I either have the obsession or I don't. That's why I introduce myself the way the book tells me to, specifically. It's in the 3rd paragraph on page 90, if anybody wants to know where it's at. It says attention should be drawn to you as a person who has recovered. Specifically tells you to introduce yourself as a recovered alcoholic. First time I heard somebody do that, it changed my entire view of Alcoholics Anonymous. I was about 36 hours out of the hospital when I went to a meeting with the guy that owned the halfway house, and he introduced himself as a recovered alcoholic. And I said, did you say recovered? Like with an ED? He said, you bet your ass I did. I said, what's that mean? He said, I'll tell you after the meeting. After the meeting, we walked out to the car and he grabbed his big book and opened up to the 10-step promises. And he says, the problem has been removed. It does not exist for me. That's what recovered means. And I said, I want that. That's what I wanted this whole time, is that. And he said, cool, you can have that, but you have to do all the work on the pages preceding that. People used to ask me if I knew about the promises. I said, you mean the ones that they read in the meetings all the time? They say, these are the 9-step promises? They say, yeah. I go, yeah, I think they're bullshit. I think they're bullshit. And I said, what do you mean? I said, he said, these are the AA promises. They said, okay, first off, they should be real specific in most meetings and say, these are the 9th-step promises. And it says, if we are painstaking about this phase of our development, that's the amends phase. So if you're not painstaking about making your amends, why would you get the results from making those painstaking amends? If you're not doing it, you don't get results that you haven't earned. And I was like, I thought I got that just for coming to the meeting. They're like, no. There's work involved. But I think I told a group of people last night, it wasn't until I came to Florida, and like I told you guys earlier, my first meeting I was 13 years old, and I got sober when I was 37, so for 25 years in and out of AA, I never even knew there was a fucking book. That's how little it was ever mentioned in the meetings I was going to. We talked about every problem under the sun. I mean, I could tell you in those groups exactly who was getting divorced and who hated their job and who hated their kids and whose car wouldn't start and whose cat wouldn't stop pissing on the rug and every problem in the world, but I couldn't tell you anything about how to write a 4-step. I couldn't tell you anything about having a prayer and meditation life. I couldn't tell you anything about a morning meditation life. I couldn't tell you anything about doing an evening review. I couldn't tell you any of that shit. I damn sure couldn't tell you how to sponsor anybody. Because we didn't talk about the book. We didn't talk about the steps, and we didn't talk about God. We talked about
Is it actually called an AA meeting, though?
knowing what I know now, they should not have even been called it.
The greatest lesson I learned in AA, I had become smart enough to realize how stupid I am. And that's the answers to all my problems.
Thank you for watching The Recovery Idiot. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Visit therecoveryidiot.com and find us on the social medias. If Ferris Bueller was a real person, he definitely would have ended up in Alcoholics Anonymous. Cameron would have a jab, a day habit, and Sloan would have multiple baby daddies.